Today, we are diving into something I think we can all relate to, something that maybe we all encounter but might secretly dread. It's small talk.
Ooh.
And today, we're going to unpack an episode of the Everyday English podcast that's all about mastering this surprisingly crucial skill. Think of this deep dive as your secret weapon for making those first encounters a little less awkward and a lot more engaging.
Yeah, it's funny how we often dismiss small talk as superficial,
Right.
but it really is the foundation for building any kind of connection.
It's like that saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yes.
But sometimes those first impressions hinge on navigating the sometimes choppy waters of small talk.
Exactly. And it's not just about appearances. There's actually a fascinating psychological dance happening when we engage in small talk.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us. What's going on beneath the surface?
Well, think about those mirror neurons everyone's talking about these days. When we interact, even in simple ways, our brains start firing in sync with the other person's. It's like our neurons are having a little conversation of their own, building a sense of rapport.
So even those seemingly meaningless, hey, how are you, exchanges are actually laying the groundwork for something deeper.
Exactly. And then there's the role of oxytocin, the so-called cuddle hormone. Even brief, positive interactions can trigger its release, helping us feel more connected and at ease.
Wow, so small talk is like a neurological cocktail for social bonding.
Right.
It's not just about being polite, it's about tapping into these primal mechanisms for connection.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And on a more practical level, small talk helps reduce that initial social anxiety we all feel in new situations. It's like dipping your toes in the water before diving into the deep end of a conversation.
Okay, so we've established that small talk is more than just idle chit-chat.
Yes.
It's a powerful tool for building rapport and easing social anxieties. But where do we actually begin? What are those go-to topics that can help us get the ball rolling?
Well, the podcast we're looking at today highlighted some classics. The weather, work or school, hobbies, travel.
Sure.
They're tried and true for a reason. They're universally relatable.
But I feel like I've had the same, wow, it's cold today conversation a million times.
Right.
How do we elevate those classic topics and make them feel more, well, engaging?
It's all about finding that spark of genuine interest. Sure, you can comment on the weather, but then try to weave in a personal detail or ask a follow-up question that steers the conversation toward common ground.
Give us an example. Let's say someone mentions the crazy snowstorm we had last week. Where could you go from there?
Okay, so instead of just agreeing, you could say something like, yeah, that snowstorm really messed up my commute. I ended up having to work from home for 2 days. What about you? Did you brave the elements?
I see what you did there. You shared a personal anecdote and then turned it into an open-ended question to invite the other person to share their experience.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond those surface-level exchanges and finding those little points of connection.
And I think the podcast also mentioned some ready-to-use phrases that can help kickstart those conversations.
Yeah.
They mentioned things like, how's your day going so far? And what have you been up to lately?
Those are great starting points. But here's where it gets interesting. Those phrases aren't magic bullets.
Right.
It's all about the delivery.
Oh, I totally get that. The same phrase can sound completely different depending on your tone of voice and body language. It's like, how's your day going so far? Can come across as genuinely interested or totally robotic.
Exactly. Think about it. Would you rather talk to someone who's enthusiastically asking about your day or someone who's just going through the motions?
Definitely the enthusiastic one. So it's not just about the words we use. It's about the energy and intention we bring to the interaction. It's about showing that we're actually interested in hearing the answer.
Precisely. And that brings us to one of the most powerful tools in the small talk arsenal, follow-up questions.
All right, tell us why follow-up questions are so important. What makes them the secret weapon of engaging small talk?
Well, think about it. When someone asks you a follow-up question, it shows they were actually listening to what you had to say.
Right.
It makes you feel heard and valued. It's like the difference between someone just nodding politely and someone leaning in with genuine curiosity. It makes you want to open up more.
Right.
Exactly. Follow-up questions signal that you're not just waiting for your turn to speak, you're actually engaged in the conversation.
Ah.
And that can lead to some surprisingly insightful and enjoyable exchanges.
So instead of just saying, oh, cool, when someone mentions their weekend plans, we should try to dig a little deeper. Ask things like, what are you most looking forward to? Or, have you been there before?
Exactly. Those kinds of questions can turn a simple exchange into a more meaningful connection.
Now, I know the podcast we're discussing today included a role play scenario where the hosts demonstrated these techniques in action. It was like they were eavesdropping on a conversation at a coffee shop.
Yes, I thought that was a really clever way to bring these concepts to life.
What stood out to you about that conversation? What made it so effective?
Well, first of all, they did a great job of weaving personal details into their responses. It wasn't just, I work in marketing, it was, I work in marketing, and I'm currently working on a campaign for a new line of sustainable clothing, which is really exciting.
Ah, so they added a layer of personal storytelling that made their responses more engaging.
Exactly. And they didn't just talk about themselves, they made sure to ask follow-up questions to keep the other person involved and show genuine interest.
It felt very balanced, a nice back and forth exchange instead of one person dominating the conversation.
And they also maintained a positive and upbeat tone throughout the interaction. It made the conversation feel light and enjoyable, even though they were talking about everyday topics.
It's amazing how a little bit of enthusiasm can really elevate those seemingly mundane exchanges.
Absolutely. Now, I know we have listeners out there who might be thinking, this all sounds great, but I'm just not a natural at small talk.
I think we can all relate to that feeling. It's like some people just glide effortlessly through those initial conversations, while others feel like they're constantly stumbling over their words.
And the podcast had some great advice for those who find small talk challenging.
Mm.
They emphasize the importance of practice. Just like with any skill,
Sure.
the more you put yourself out there, the more comfortable you'll become.
It's like anything else. The more you do it, the easier it gets. But what about that initial fear of making a mistake or saying the wrong thing?
Well, they made a really important point. They said, don't strive for perfection. Small talk is about connection, not performance.
I think we often put so much pressure on ourselves to be witty and charming, but in reality, people are more forgiving than we think.
Exactly. They're not expecting you to be a stand-up comedian. They just want to have a pleasant and engaging conversation.
So it's about embracing the awkward moments, the pauses, the fumbles. It's all part of the process.
Now, here's where things get really interesting. The podcast challenged us to reframe our mindset about small talk. Instead of seeing it as a chore, what if we approached it as an opportunity to learn something new about someone?
I love that. It's like turning small talk into a mini adventure.
Exactly. Even the most seemingly mundane encounter can hold hidden gems of information or insight.
So instead of dreading those small talk moments, we should see them as chances to expand our horizons, to connect with different perspectives. It's like a microcosm of the bigger world out there.
And they even gave us a little challenge. Try to learn one new fact about the person you're talking to during your next small talk encounter. It could be their favorite book, a recent hobby they've picked up, or even their go-to coffee order.
That's a great idea. It adds an element of fun and purpose to those interactions. It's like a little treasure hunt.
Now, we've talked a lot about the practical techniques of small talk, the phrases, the follow-up questions, the importance of personal details. But there's another element that can really elevate those interactions.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What's the secret ingredient?
It's vulnerability.
Vulnerability. Now that's an interesting twist. I wouldn't have thought to bring that into small talk. Isn't that a bit too much too soon?
I know, right? It sounds a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But hear me out. It's not about spilling your deepest secrets to a stranger at the bus stop. It's more about those small, authentic glimpses into who you are.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So it's not about grand reveals. It's about those little cracks in the facade that let people connect with the real you.
Exactly. Like sharing a quick, relatable anecdote about a work mishap,
Oh, yeah.
or admitting you're a bit nervous at a networking event. Even confessing you're terrible at remembering names can make you instantly more likable.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, hey, I'm human too. I mess up. I get nervous. I forget things. It disarms people and creates a sense of shared experience.
And wouldn't that make the other person more likely to open up as well? Like, vulnerability begets vulnerability.
Absolutely. It's like a silent invitation to connect on a deeper level. Think about it. When someone shares something a little vulnerable with you, it creates a sense of trust and intimacy, even if it's a fleeting interaction.
It's like that saying, people don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. And vulnerability has a way of making people feel seen and understood.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between politeness and authenticity. And remember, small talk is a low-stakes environment to practice this skill.
So it's a safe space to experiment with vulnerability, to step outside our comfort zones a little bit.
And who knows, those small acts of vulnerability might just lead to a meaningful connection or an unexpected friendship.
Absolutely.
You know, this conversation has really shifted my perspective on small talk.
Me too.
I used to see it as this awkward hurdle to overcome, but now I'm starting to see it as a doorway to deeper connection.
That's the beauty of it. It's not about being perfect or performing. It's about being present, being genuine, and being open to the possibilities.
This episode of the Everyday English podcast also did a great job of breaking down some key terms related to small talk, which I think will be super helpful for our listeners.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They highlighted phrases like break the ice, which is that crucial first step in initiating a conversation.
Right.
It's about making people feel comfortable and opening up the lines of communication.
It's like that initial crack in the surface, creating a space for something new to emerge.
They also talked about go-to topics or phrases, those trusty conversation starters that you can always rely on.
Like, what are you working on these days? Or have you seen any good movies lately? Those kinds of open-ended questions that can spark a conversation.
Exactly. And they emphasize the importance of follow-up questions to keep the conversation flowing and show that you're actively listening.
So we've got our icebreakers, our go-to phrases, and our follow-up questions. It sounds like we've got all the tools we need to navigate the world of small talk with confidence and grace.
And most importantly, we've learned that small talk isn't about being a social butterfly or a master conversationalist. It's about being present, being curious, and being open to the unexpected connections that might arise from those seemingly insignificant exchanges.
So, dear listeners, as you go about your day, remember that every interaction, no matter how small, holds the potential for something meaningful. Embrace those small talk moments, practice those vulnerability muscles, and see where those conversations lead you.
You never know that casual chat at the coffee shop might just spark a new friendship, a business collaboration, or even a life-changing encounter.
And hey, if you have any hilarious small talk mishaps or unexpected triumphs, be sure to share them with us on social media. We love hearing your stories.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep connecting.
Until next time, keep practicing and stay confident.